Good morning and welcome, everybody. How is everybody doing this Sunday morning? It's the second official Sunday of 2026. I hope everybody is having a good week and had a good start to the new year. You are watching the Comprehend This webcast, and we are today talking about what if they're too comfortable? So you know that moment when your CI class feels too comfortable, like they've upgraded from safe and supported to we live here now and make our own rules? Yeah, that moment. Today on Comprehend This, we're talking about what happens when chill crosses the line and how to reel it back in without turning it into a villain in your own classroom story. I'm joined by Kayla Velasquez, and Jackie Deming-Plunk is back with us. Kayla, who literally builds familia level community with music, movement, reading, and Spanish TV. And Jackie, we all know, who also knows the delicate art of keeping class fun without letting it turn into a Spanish language sitcom. We're unpacking boundaries, vibes, leadership energy, and why fun does not mean do whatever you want while I slowly lose my soul. If you've ever thought, wow, they're way too comfortable, maybe even more too comfortable, this episode is for you. We'll be back after these short messages. Pop quiz. Are your assessments aligned with what you're actually teaching? No? Cool. Let's fix that. The Assessment Academy is 10 pre-recorded lessons that help you ditch the scantrons and actually assess what matters, like proficiency, performance, and whether your students are still breathing by Friday. Watch on your time, as many times as you want, for a whole year. And no, there's not a single lesson about bubble sheets or grading 72 essays at 11 p.m. You're welcome. Over to mm.us/academy and start assessing like you actually mean it.
Welcome to Comprehend This, real talk for real language teachers. No drills, no dry theory, just honest stories, practical ideas, and a reminder you're not alone in the CI trenches. Let's dive in.
Good morning. How are we all doing this morning?
Doing great.
Pretty good.
Awesome. Kayla, it's your first time with us, so let us a little know about, if I can speak English this morning, let us know a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I am in my 11th year teaching, and I I always like to say I hate working, but I love my job. So if I have to work, I would only want to do this job. I teach in Western Wisconsin at a small rural school. I am a department of one, so I'm the only language teacher in my district. I teach exploratory middle school and then all levels of Spanish at the high school. And I'm super proud that when I came into this school, that there was only Spanish 1 and 2. And my fourth year there, I graduated a class of 15 Spanish 4 students. And I've been using CI ever since my second semester of my first year teaching, because I thought that I just thought that it was unsustainable otherwise. So I dove into my CI teaching journey kind of right away. And I used textbooks for literally maybe 4 months, and I haven't looked back since. So my room is filled with books, and we do class novels, and we do FVR, and we do music every day, and we do dancing on Fridays, and calendar talk, and we laugh and we have fun, and I cry because I'm so proud, and it's great. So I live here with my husband and my 2-year-old puppy and our 2 cats, one who is the grumpiest one you'll ever meet and one who's the sweetest you'll ever meet. So
And I have a dog that's just almost a year and a half, so yes, going through those terrible twos, getting ready there with her. And I'm like you. I only did textbook for the first 4 months of mine. Once winter break came and I came back, well, it was actually second semester, which was shortly into January. I started with CI back in 2001, and I haven't looked back since. So I kind of like with you. I did not do the textbook. I would not be here today if it were for the textbook at all. Not absolutely at all. So thank you and welcome for being with us. Jackie is a semi-regular with us, so welcome back from What part of Tennessee is it? Northern, southern, eastern, western?
Southwest. I'm about 2 hours from Memphis, but still on the state line.
Still in St. Long. Well, welcome, welcome back. She wasn't able to be with us last week because illness bestruck her household, but we're glad to have her this week. So today we're talking about what if they're too comfortable managing chill without losing control. I'm going to tell you one thing just to start it off because it's a double edged sword for me. I like having continuity. I think there's a benefit and a negative to for kids to have the same teacher for their whole time, their levels 1 through 4. And I've only had that one time where I had like a handful of kids. I had levels 1, 2, and 3 because we only taught to level 3 in middle school. And it was really wonderful because I could see where their progression went. And I really like that. And then I also know this is kind of sounds selfish and conceited, but I know that where they got to from level 1 to level 3 was all because of me, because there was no other teacher in there. Because when you have like, oh, they were with me for level 1 and then they went to someone else for level 2 and they're back to me for level 3, how much of it was their level 1 experience? How much of what they know is from their level 2 experience? You don't really know, but when you've had them all along. So I like that. But then there's also that negative is when you tell them the class rules and everything, they're like, oh, yeah, push over here. They get too comfortable and they want to break that. And it doesn't happen. It's like I taught 11 years in one school, and it happened a lot because I had a lot of repeat customers. And so I was like trying to train my new kids that are in there, but the old kids are like bringing up their old bad habits and kind of teaching the kids the bad things. And then I moved to a new school 2 years ago. This is my second year there. I went back to high school. And so last year, everybody was new, no repeats. First semester, everybody was new, no repeats. But now I've got a Spanish 2 this semester, and I've got out of half my kids are repeats and half my kids are new to me. And there's that comfortability there that they are way too comfortable already. Like on the first day of school, they are already like it's already been 6 months into school year already, that they're so comfortable and play the games that they play, not necessarily in a bad way, but they know the buttons to push and they know what they can get away with and what they can't get away with. And if you try to change anything, like I changed some things up this semester, they're like still going with the old way of doing things. So there's a double-edged sword. I like seeing familiar faces and I like that continuity. And I think it also benefits the kids in some ways to have that continuity because they don't have to spend time learning all the ins and outs of a new teacher and a new class. They can just focus on the input. But there is that double-edged sword sometimes. So what do you guys think? Any opinions?
I would totally echo that. I've said for years, because I've always been a department of one my entire 11 years, and I've always said it's a blessing and a curse. And I say it's a blessing for the same reasons that you do, because I get to see exactly where they start from and then where they end up, regardless of wherever they decide to end, whether it's just 1 year or 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And like that sense of pride that I get as an educator of kind of being like, oh my gosh, look what they can do after being in my room and in this program, and it's amazing. And I mean, that's priceless. It's also makes it really easy as far as lesson planning, unit planning, long-term planning, because I know exactly what they know. I know exactly if they've learned this structure before. I know if I can use Shakira and Bizarrap's diss track with this group because I didn't do it last year with that group. Like it makes it so easy to plan for things. But I totally echo that as far as expectations and classroom management go. My Spanish 1 is the easiest to do that with because they're brand new to me, or I mean, my eighth graders. But when we're talking about like full time, 65-minute, year long courses, my Spanish 1, when we do those classroom norming things together, that's all fresh for them. And it's really easy to stick to those expectations from a brand new Spanish 1 crew. Spanish 2, it's still somewhat easy because they're still, it's only been a year in class and they come back and they're excited, but you revisit expectations and you go over things again. And it doesn't seem like Spanish 2 is one of my harder spots to control. But it's when I get into the threes and the fours that it gets tough because they're super comfortable, which I love. Like I wouldn't trade that for the world. But they're so used to being that room. They're used to me. They're used to the routines and the procedures. And I mean, I feel like how many times can you do the same classroom norming with the same students and without it feeling like an eye roll or you're also getting older students at this point. They're 17, they're 18. And I feel like I get a little bit of pushback at that point too. So I guess one strategy that I tried starting last year that I found kind of started to work was really being explicit about our proficiency goals and like their growth goals, like their personal, what they want to get out of this class and where they can expect to be by the end of this, Spanish 3, Spanish 4. So then when we come back to expectations, it's like if this is for you, if you want to get to intermediate mid on your speaking, this is why you have to follow these classroom expectations. So I've been finding that having those personal goals tied to proficiency has kind of helped in a way. And we revisit those goal sheets and we have those individual conversations and class conversations in those upper levels. And I feel like that's something that's helped me a little bit. I
Awesome.
also want to say that I feel like there might be a little bit of shame in this whole like idea out there of like it's okay that our classrooms sometimes like run into too comfortable and we shouldn't feel shame about that. Like CI teachers are amazing at making classroom communities, and I know that like as teachers, as educators, we don't sometimes want to admit that we've lost control or things aren't going our way, and I feel like that's something that we maybe don't want to admit, but it's okay that that happens, and we just have to be able to talk about it and then talk about what we do to move forward and so that it continues to be like a positive, safe, productive space for us and for our kids. And so I just would want to remove any shame that anybody feels like they have from that idea if you feel like your classroom sometimes does feel a little bit too comfortable.
And if I can just piggyback on that, absolutely. I love what you just said there because I was talking to Kayla before we started this morning about my second period last semester, which just was not buying into any of it. And that community building just couldn't happen. It didn't happen. They kept butting heads all along the way. And I would much rather have too comfortable than that coldness where I walked in the classroom and I could like walk in from, when the beginning of the school year started, I'm in Sacramento, so it's 110 outside, and I walk into a class that's like 54 degrees because they are just not into it. I would much rather have that. And you are so right that we as CI teachers work really hard to build that community. And I'm there for the kids, and I like to get to know the kids and who they are and use what they bring to the table to teach them. And if I was just teaching like cold math or, those types of things where I wouldn't have that relationship, I don't think I'd be here anymore. I mean, it's that relationship with the kids, that building that community is so well. So you're right. It shouldn't be a shameful thing. We obviously want to manage it so that it's not complete chaos. But as I said, I would much rather have too comfortable than offstandish type of thing where you're constantly butting heads along the way. Absolutely. Absolutely what you just said. What about you, Jackie?
Yeah, I mean, I mostly agree. I have never been in a department of one. That's kind of the only difference in my story so far. But it kind of ends up being a department of one because the current school that I'm at and the last school I was at tried to keep all of the students with the same teacher between semesters. Um, because we were on a 4x4 block, so the kids take Spanish 1 in the fall, they take Spanish 2 in the spring, and they try to keep them with the same teacher, um, unless there's some extreme circumstance that requires them to move to a different class. Um, and so, yeah, semester 2, they tend to be very comfortable with me. They do get shifted around, so they don't have all of the exact same classmates. but they do end up with mostly the same class. There'll be some new people, and that kind of shifts the balance a little bit. Um, but yeah, I almost take pride in having a chill classroom. My kids are very comfortable talking to me about stuff, and I feel like kids do need that. They need an adult they feel like they can talk to, and so to some extent, I enable the chill to happen because there is still important stuff happening, even if the Spanish takes a back seat for a minute. And I think overall it leads to more buy-in in when we're doing things that aren't fun per se. Um, and really it's about learning how to strike that balance, and it's about learning quick moves to regain the control in the situation and pivot where you need to. And if you can learn to strike that delicate balance, then things don't get too chill usually.
Absolutely. And you said something that brought to my mind right away that when kids want to talk to me, they want to share things, but sometimes it's a little too comfortable about what they want to share, and it's not one of those things like the
Yeah.
self-reporting, the stuff that you have to report, not that kind of stuff. But like I had a kid who I like made a joke about something about Target, and he's like, "Oh, I'm banned from Target." Well, oh my gosh, I don't know why I asked, thinking that it was like shoplifting or stealing, but I asked, I said, "So how do you get banned from Target?" I mean, because he's got a lifetime ban from this Target. He cannot go in. They got a picture of him in the security thing, and he's not allowed in. And I am so regretful that I asked. And then he told me, and it's not appropriate to talk about here. It's that bad. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. He goes, well, you shouldn't have asked the question if you didn't want to know the answer. I'm like, yeah, but that answer was so out of nowhere. I was not expecting that at all. I
And
thought
it could have
maybe
been prefaced with a, you don't want to know.
yeah, it should have been
Like,
not the NSFW, not safe for work comment beforehand. Sometimes they just share. I'm like, oh my gosh, I did not want to hear that. And it's funny because I had that kid last semester in a non-Spanish class, and now I have him again this semester in a Spanish class, and I can't look at him the same way. It is just, I'm like, there is just too much information that I know now, and I didn't
mhm.
want to know about that. So it's
Yeah.
kind of, sometimes that's the word I want to use, they overshare. They get too friendly and they think of you like a friend, and they share that kind of
Yeah.
information they'd share with a friend. And I'm like, I ain't your friend. Nope, 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 nope. We're not
Yeah.
going over that boundary. That boundary, keep it
Yeah.
a little bit school appropriate. You don't have to be church like, but we do need to be school like. And there's some things just because it goes through
Mhm.
your head should not come out your mouth.
Yep.
And that was
Yep.
one of them.
I'm one of the things I say a lot is I don't want to know. I don't want to know.
Yep.
Don't tell me. I don't,
I
you
know
know, like,
once he told me the start of it,
and
I'm like, I don't want to know anymore. Stop. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Yesterday, wait, not
yeah.
yesterday. Yesterday was Saturday. Friday, I had a kid. I had him the year before, and his name is Junior, and he's like, oh, I gotta take a dump. I need to pass. I need to go take a dump. I'm gonna explode the bath. He's like going on and elaborate. I'm like, we don't need to know this. You can just say I need to go to the bathroom. What you do in the bathroom, we don't need to know the details. Then he comes back and he tells us all the details. And I'm like, we don't need to know this. You went to the bathroom. Hopefully you washed your hands. You came back. There's oversharing. We are in Spanish. And at least if you're going to describe what you did, please do it in Spanish. At
Yeah.
least. At least. At
Yeah.
least do that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have very selective hearing sometimes. I'm like, especially between bells, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, well,
Oh,
bell
yeah.
wasn't ringing, so I'm just going to pretend I didn't hear that.
But I do use the between bell things. It was so funny, especially when I taught middle school. I'm always listening because they are always talking. And so I'll bring it up like they'll be talking about so and so's now dating so and so. And so I'll like throw that into a story. And they're like, how the heck did you know that? And I'm like,
Hmm.
I'm everywhere. I see everything. And really, like, you just said it outside in the hall as you were walking into class. I mean, I was just paying attention. And so I use that information to make the class more fun and interesting because they think
Hmm.
I know everything. Like, oh, yeah. And I go, oh, well, John and Melissa, they're not talking to each other today. They broke up. And then, like, that just happened like 10 minutes ago. How do you know that already? It was kind of,
Mhm.
just keep your ears open. So there are things you want to hear that you
Yeah.
can use appropriately in class. And there are things that, oh my gosh, I wish. I always tell the
Hmm.
kids sometimes there are benefits to being deaf and there are benefits to being blind sometimes in class. That some things I don't want to see and some things I
Yep.
definitely don't want to hear. We had a kid, we were doing colors and body parts. We play Twister, and I have two giant Twister boards, so they can fit more people on them. They're really, really big. So I takes two of them, and it comes up with a good 2/3 of my classroom. And we had a kid who was trying to stay up and had bent over, and his pants came down, and his underwear was showing. I'm like, oh my gosh, benefits to being blind, benefits to being blind. And so that was a class joke that whenever he bends over, that his pants come down. It was just kind of funny. Those kinds of things that happen in class.
Yes. And the inside jokes though, like talk about
Oh yes,
community, right? Like
yes.
I those are
Yeah.
some of my favorite parts. And then, something will be one year I was doing busca and something with comida. And so I was hiding like plastic food around the room and I hit a fry, like a plastic French fry. And so I was like, busca la papa frita. And a kid came back with like an actual French fry, and I'm like, where did you find this? And they found like an actual old, gross
Ew.
McDonald's French fry like in my library. I'm like, that's disgusting, and I didn't put that in there, and who knows when that's been in there since. But then that old French fry got taped up on the whiteboard for the rest of the year with just like a piece of tape, and then it just was called La Papa Frita, and then it just became like an inside joke, and the other classes didn't get it, and they're like, why is that there? And I'm like, you had to be there, you had to be there. But like, when we talk about classroom community, like that is the type of stuff that I love. And
Yep.
you can only get it if you're in that if you're in that crew. And so,
Yep.
on a typical day, I have like six groups of inside jokes that I'm also managing.
Yeah. I do the same thing, except I kind of spread them around because I like to call my classroom we're one big family who can't sit at the same dinner table at the same time. So I share stories from one class to the other. And so um, we were just in our first week, and as I get new students every semester, I'm like Jackie on the 4x4. So I got brand new students. And in my level one class, in period one, we have this kid named Nikolai. And Nikolai, we established on the first day that he was not normal because when I asked him what kind of music he listened to, he said he listened to experimental pop. None of us had heard of that genre of music, not once. And then we went and looked it up on Spotify and listened to a song, and we're like, what? So we told him he was not normal because he listened to this experimental pop. So it's kind of like a little joke. Well, then the next day we were still talking with him, and he talked about how he shaves his legs. And we're like, what guy shaves their leg? I mean, if you're a swimmer, I
Yeah.
understand, but it wasn't swimming season and he's not a swimmer. So we were laughing about that. He goes, yeah, my mom makes fun of me for shaving my legs. I'm like, and rightfully so. We kept a vote how many boys shaved their legs. Nobody in the class did. So we did that. And then next period, period two, I started the class guy, class, you won't believe. Remember we talked yesterday and I didn't tell them the name. I go, that kid is even more abnormal than he was yesterday. And I said, can anybody guess what he does now? And nobody could guess because that was not on anybody's bingo card, right? And I'm like, he shaves his legs. He doesn't wax them. He shaves his legs. And I'm like, how many boys in here shave their legs? And no boy raises their hands. And one of the kid recognized it was his friend. I could see it in his face. He's like laughing. And then I go, and I'm not going to mention any names. And they go, Nikolai. And everybody starts laughing. And the other kid laughs. I go, are you Nikolai's friend? He's like, yes. I go, you're just as strange then for being Nikolai's friend. And then we went on with another kid and Eli. And Eli was talking about he likes to play video games and he plays video Fortnite every night. And so then I asked him, "Do you have a girlfriend?" He goes, "No." I go, "Well, it's obvious because you're playing Fortnite every night instead of trying to get a girlfriend." And so we were talking about that a little bit, and then he goes on and he says, I said, because I teach at a career technical academy, so he's in the culinary program. I said, "So what's your specialty dish?" He says, "Spaghetti." And I go, "Oh, poor Eli. Unfortunately, no girl's going to experience his magnificent spaghetti because he's playing Fortnite all the time." And then we started going, and the kids go, "Oh, yes, but he feeds his spaghetti to his game controller." So I did that, and we found a little picture of him with his game controller, and we have a Valentine's Day dance coming up in, next month. And so I'm like, "Class, he doesn't take a girl to the game because he doesn't have a girlfriend. So guess what does he take to the dance?" And they're like, "His game controller." So we had so much fun with that. In fact, I'm going to show you because then I use ChatGPT in my classroom all the time. Let's see, Eli with spaghetti. I'm getting the images so I can show you. Um, we made these image, and my first period they didn't hear this because this happened second period, but I wrote a story for our reading time, and they're going to hear the story then, so I can share it with them, and it makes it really funny. Let me pull up the pictures here real quick here that I made. So this is the first one with Eli making spaghetti for his game controller. And that looks just like Eli because I uploaded his school picture to get, that picture in there. And then here he is taking his game controller to Valentine's Day dance. So this is going to become a funny story that, endeared all of us in that first week of Spanish 1. The kids were all laughing, which tells you they're understanding what's going
Mm-hmm.
on. And
Mm-hmm.
this is going to become this like little class mythology that we're going to be working on. And at the end of class, Eli with a smile comes and goes, "Profe, you did me dirty. You did me dirty all class."
And
But
that
it
picture
was,
should be framed and be on your wall somewhere in that room.
oh, that's a great, I should definitely, I'm going to print them on Monday. Now that you said that, I'm going to
You
print them on
should.
Monday and put them up.
Or
Laminate
for
them.
Valentine's Day, you can do little Valentine's cards with those on the
Yeah.
front.
You can print a 5x7 through Walmart for like 17
Oh
cents.
no,
I mean,
they put in color copy machines in our school. So I can just print it on the
like,
copy machine, I can
Put
laminate
on the
it.
sheet
We'll
protector,
keep it up,
yeah.
and at the end of the semester, I'll give it to Eli, saying, "Here's your present for the end of the semester."
I love it.
there you
Because
love
I
it.
make stories about my kids I make 4 stories a week, and I put different kids in them. And what I do is I take all the stories of that they're starred in, and I print them out for them and give them in a little booklet so they can remember Spanish with. But now I can do these pictures because I've been having so much fun that ChatGPT now does pictures. I started it last spring, making pictures of kids in the stories that we do that come up because it does take a couple minutes. I put it on there, put my prompt on there. We
Mhm.
continue talking in Spanish, and then a couple minutes later, it pops up, and I can show it to them. And they are just funny. And some of the kids are like, "Oh, you can't use my school picture. I'll send you a picture that you can use because I don't want that school picture to be the one that ChatGPT uses to make my character." So it's funny. So moving back to our little conversation about being too comfortable, when do you realize what makes you think that all of a sudden this has gone to the one side of too comfortable?
I
What's
feel
your
like I
indicator?
have some non-negotiables, and
That's a good.
I guess there's three things. I was trying to think of when, like, the difference between a lively classroom community versus a chaotic classroom community. Because I love lively and I also love chill. And I think they both can live within the same space, either at the same time or within the same room, just maybe on different days. Um, but on days where it maybe seems lively and I'm trying to decide, okay, is this a good lively or is this a chaotic? I think chaotic is when things seem either unproductive or uncomfortable or unsafe. And I have some non negotiables for those three things that I look out for. And I mean, the easiest one, I guess not the easiest, but the least threatening one is the unproductive. So like I don't care if kids, I have flexible seating in my classroom, and I don't care if kids are like laying on the floor during if they're working on something or if they're doing like a group game or I have rugs and bean bags and stuff. And so if they're like physically like laying out on the floor, I know other teachers don't like that, but I don't care about that. But if like they're laying on the floor and like rolling around, then that's like an unproductive type of laying on the floor. So like I feel like that's like one example of like a non-negotiable as far as like a physical type of thing that I could see that like gets into that unproductive territory. As long as they are doing the thing that I'm asking them to do, I'm okay with it. As far as uncomfortable goes, if I see things happening like exclusion or insults, excessive swearing, I say excessive swearing because I do like to teach the kids like miércoles and like some of those like cute little like fun little like Spanish like the shiitake mushrooms like
Mm-hmm.
those versions of things just because language is real and language is communication and I swear in my real life, and they probably are going to want to too. So I do give them some things that they could use within the classroom context that can allow them to express frustration. But if it goes it like if it's English swearing, like that makes me uncomfortable, and then I tell them that, and I'm like I don't care if you do that on your time, but like I don't like hearing that. So that makes me uncomfortable, and I'll just share that with them. Um, and then unsafe things would be like not following like our big school rules, of course, like, like violence, threatening, bullying. I mean, any of those things. And I've never had issues with those. But I feel like those three things are the difference for me in between the type of lively and or chill community that I'm okay with and one that I'm not.
And I love what you said, the non-negotiables. That's a really good word for that. And yours are the same as mine. The unsafe, because like in my BFFS class, my Building Foundations for Success class I taught last semester, which was not Spanish related at all, it was all, and the kids were on their own. It's like I described what activity they were working on today, and they were on their own. They got rambunctious, especially because I had 17 boys and 2 girls, and all the boys knew each other, so they were slapping each other, doing all kinds of stuff it progressed into the non-safe. And so I'm like, we got to be safe in here. We can have a little bit. You can sit where you want. You can do what you need to do to get your work done, as long as you're getting your work done. So I am right there with you. They need to be productive. They need to produce something by the end of that period or that time slot that we're working on some activity. They've got to do that. And exclusion is a big one for me, that we don't exclude anybody from the classroom, that everybody's welcome. You may not like them outside of class, but at least in class, you're going to treat them with respect and moving on. I'm not asking you to hang out with them on the weekends or have a sleepover with them or do any of those kinds of things, but at least be respectful, because in real life, we have to work with people we don't necessarily like. You may have to work, even as teachers, we sometimes get put into groups as teachers that we have to work on a project. Like we're doing our WASC accreditation right now. We're working on that. And so we're put into groups, and there might be some people you work really well with and some people you might not work really well with, but we still have to work together on a professional thing. And I think it's a really important skill for kids to understand that, we're not excluding anybody. Everybody's got to be included, but that doesn't mean you have to like them. You just have to respect them as a human being. So I think those things, and swearing is a big thing. I came from middle school I taught 11 years in high school, and swearing wasn't as big of a deal. Then I taught 11 years in middle school, and COVID happened. And then I came back to high school, and swearing is a really big deal at my school. They do it a lot. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like, my poor virgin ears, all the swearing that I hear on there. So that's another one that I'm working on with them too. So it's been a problem. And I like your thing with the miércoles. That's those kind of things are the euphemisms kind of funny, and it brings
Mm-hmm.
culture in too, real life culture. And I always explain to my kids, because they want to know the swear words. I'm like, the swear words are 10 times stronger than they in Spanish than they are in English, because a lot of them have religious backgrounds. And if you walk down the street and start using these bad words, some stranger's going to slap you across the face because they're not used like they're used in English. And they're like, well, my Hispanic friend swears just as much as I do. I go, that's because he learned that from you, that it's acceptable in America. But ask him if he'll do that in Mexico or Guatemala or that, and he'll say, uh-uh, and
Mhm.
where nudity is a little bit more freeing in other countries where it's not so much here. I say it's kind of like the opposite thing. Nudity's okay
Mhm.
in other countries, more so than swearing. And here, swearing's more okay than nudity. So
That's
it's
a good
kind of like that.
point.
And I bring that cultural point to them that they won't. And if I
Yeah.
see some random Hispanic kid walking in the hall, I'll say, come in here for 5 minutes and let's ask these questions about the swearing. And they'll say, oh no, my grandma will slap me if I start saying those words. But you swear
Mhm.
here
Yeah.
in school, he goes, well, that's because all the Americans do. So I'm used to doing it that way.
Right.
When in Rome.
That's a good point. Yeah. And to bring in that cultural, component of it too and just educate them about it. And I think kids appreciate that. Like they
Hmm.
don't know that, so I think they genuinely like hearing that. And I feel like I'm going to bring that now next time that conversation comes up. So I'm glad you mentioned
And,
that
and,
and I should
and back in
try
our
that.
day, we couldn't look the words up. They weren't in the dictionary
Right.
most of the time, stuff. But now I say, you really want to know them? Go ahead and look them up when you go home. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you can find them online if you really want to, but I'm just letting you know that most of the words have a religious connotation. Like when you're using the B word, that's referring to Mother Mary, and people are not going to think that is a fun word for you to be using on a regular basis. You
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
the F word has to do with the goat, but the goat is the devil, the representation of the devil on the
Yeah.
in the Bible. So, just be mindful of your audience when you use them. Because I remember in when I was in high school in the 80s, I know I'm old. I had my a Spanish when in Spanish story I had this kid who was Mexican, and he taught me this song that I still know today, and it's full of swear words, but it's to bippity boppity boo. It's the to that music. Um, so but I still know those swear words, but I knew the context in which it was okay to use them because he was really hesitant to teach me that song because of the American way of, using swear words. And back in the 80s, we did not use swear words like they use the swear words now. Not at all. We would never swear in front of an adult. Not ever, 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 ever would that ever have happened. But nowadays, they just don't care. So, yes, I
Yeah.
like your idea of non-negotiables. I think that's a really good word for that. That's the way they go over that line. Absolutely. What about you, Jackie?
Um, so for me, I do have some non-negotiables. Unlike you guys, I am not as bothered by swearing. Um, like I don't just say, yeah, you can say whatever you want in my class and it's totally cool and fine and whatever. Like I definitely emphasize the idea of time and place. That's another thing I say a lot in my classroom is like, hey, there's a time and a place. This is not the time and this is not the place. You know, just to start getting them to think about, oh, there are things that are appropriate in certain situations and there are things that are not in others, and I tell them like, there are things, y'all are not my friends. You are children. I'm not friends with children. It's just never going to happen. I like you guys. I love you guys. I care about you guys, but you are not my friends. And so the way that I talk to you and the way that I talk to my friends is different. And the way I talk to you and the way I talk to my friends is different than the way I talk to my family. And you need to learn that there are times and places for certain things. And my thing with whenever they ask about cussing is I'm like, number one, cussing in Spanish is not like cussing in English. It's a lot more illustrative. It's and it's not something that is done the way it is here. It's not as casual. And then I'm like, and ethically and legally, I'm not allowed to teach you those words. Like I am by law not allowed to teach you that. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah. And I go over that with them. I'm like, there are rules and laws and ethics that guide what teachers are and aren't allowed to do with you guys. So if there are teachers who are doing these things, then that's a problem, and that kind of goes back to a safety thing for me. And that's a lot of it for me is like, are we being safe physically and mentally and emotionally with each other? And are we being productive? Because there's a point where, and it's always about finding that line. Like, it's fine for them to express frustration to a point, but then it gets to a point where it's no longer productive. And that's when I'm like, okay, and we're going to move on. Thank you for the tea. Let's move on. Um, and just kind of going with that. And usually it involves, if it won't go anywhere else, then changing activities is a good way to recalibrate the pacing and just kind of go, all right, and pivot, and we go into a different activity. And that's something I got from John Coward, with his packet method. He was teaching in Memphis, which when I first encountered his work, I was teaching in a Memphis light kind of situation. Um, and so that was very helpful for me to kind of learn how to make those shifts into how to get into a more productive space with my students.
Absolutely, and you hit about a couple of things that I was thinking as you were going through. Um, Oops, if I hit the wrong button on the wrong screen. I'm trying to take notes as you're going through, so I remember everything, and I'm on the wrong screen. Um, the swearing. I'm going to rephrase. I'm not offended by the swearing because I'm not one of those prude type people, not at all. But I always just joke about that with my students. But my thing is
Hmm.
like you, like say time and place. And when they become too comfortable with using these words, they're going to use them in the wrong time, in the wrong place outside of school. I mean,
Yeah.
in school, it's
Yep.
low stakes. They get in trouble, they get written up. Nothing really big happens. We protect them. But let's say it's a job interview and they let out the F bomb because they're so used to saying the F bomb out there. That's a job opportunity that's now lost. Or let's say they got the job, they made it through the interview, but now they're cussing a little too much, and some people are getting offended and putting this under harassment, and now they're getting into more because they don't know the audience that they're doing. So that time and place is a real thing, and when they become too comfortable, they don't even know that they're doing it and when they're doing it. And I taught with she's going to hate me for calling her out, but Carmen Andrews from Las Vegas. I taught with her for many years, and we always used to have to remind her because we'd be talking in the hall right at the beginning of the school year, and she has forgotten to turn off her summer mouth and moved it to her school mouth. So we're in the hallways and she's like cussing up a storm. We're like, we're in school, we're in school. She goes, oh, I keep forgetting. I haven't gotten that mode to switch back into school mode where you're filtering what you're saying. And that's the big thing with me with the swearing. It's more about them being mindful of time and place, and they don't really understand that school's a different time and place because they hang out with their friends. That's the reason for being school for them. They do not think about it as education. It's a place for them to hang out with their friends. So there's no difference in place between the mall and school for them. But I want them to realize in the real world that can be a problem. You can get in trouble for cursing too much in the job place if you're offending other people. So I like that time and place is really there, and that is key. Always have a backup activity in the back of your pocket for when anything goes wrong. I have backup activities, but sometimes I use them too much. So I have what I call a thinking activity, not for them to think, but for me to think, how am I going to get myself out of this hole that I just dug myself into? And it's usually I have backup videos that I can play, whether it be a Senor Woolley song that I've got 3 or 4 minutes to think of some activity I can pivot, or I have some funny animated shorts that I have that are there, and it gets the kids to pay attention while I'm scrambling for an activity to do in the background. Like, what haven't I done? What can we do that's a little bit different that I can transition them to? Because what we're doing right now isn't working just because it's not that day for that activity, or it went so far down the rabbit hole that I can't get it back. So I need to find something else. So I have some of those. So either have backup activities or what I call teacher thinking activities, where the kids are doing something like watching a video that I don't have to grade later, and I can just go ahead and while that video is going, and maybe it takes 2 videos for me to think of something that we can pivot to do right away that was really helpful. So I like that too. The backup activity is really, really important for that.
Jackie, do you have some go-to backups?
When in doubt, I make them right.
Mm-hmm. Because it
Um,
takes a while too.
yes. And it also like it's because usually what ends up happening is they get to palling around a little too much, and like
Mhm,
it, if I change modes and get them to start writing, then they have to focus on the writing, and they can't focus on the writing and keep running around the room like a bunch of goofballs. You know, and it's something that recenters them and focuses them down to a single point. And then I can transition them into like reading or something like that where it's individual and they're having to be quiet and focus on something. Um, and that usually works as like a reset.
mhm,
Um, is it work for me? Sort of. The only way it's really worked for me is if we haven't really done anything that we can write about, but I can always find us something to write about. You know,
mhm,
even if it's just the discussion that they were having that took us off the rails. Or, you know, because a lot of times it happens when we're in calendar talk, or they're getting too crazy with their story and trying to come up with really elaborate, complicated things to put into it. And then I'm like, you know, that sounds great. You can do that in your version that you write when you get home tonight. Which is something I got from, I think Von Ray is the one who said that in a conference. He might have gotten it from Blaine. I don't know, but it came from that world. And it just kind of like cuts the tension and we move on. And they get a reason for it essentially later on if they really want it. Of like, yeah, it's just we got to keep it a little simpler for the sake of, you know, like progression.
Exactly. Do you have any backup activities you use, Kayla?
As we're having this conversation, I'm trying to think of some that I've done, and I do feel like I tend to go to writing, but I also like to. I find that I still like to be um, give the illusion that I'm like up in front and in charge. So I like to do the 1-3-10 rights. Have you
Oh yeah.
guys done
Hmm.
those before?
Yep.
So then it kind of it's like the independent, but then I'm also still there, like leading the activity. So it's like I did plan this. This wasn't a fallback for me. This was actually in my plan.
Yeah.
And then it just makes it seem like it's a little bit more of a structured activity. Um, I really like the idea of the thinking breaks.
Yeah.
I last year I bought all of I'm gonna be so sad that I can't remember who wrote the books. All of the En que estoy pensando, all of the what am I thinking about riddle books
Hmm.
in Spanish. And so those have been a good fallback for me where we'll do riddles of like, guess who I'm thinking of, and we'll, read clue by clue and kind of go through those. And that it's a reading activity, but we'll do it on the dot cam and we'll go one by one. And, they fill time, but it also allows me to, they need to really focus on what the clues are. And then I have to explain the clues. And so it's a good kind of reset type of activity because they have to really be focused on it. And I have I think there's 7 books out now. I got them all on Amazon. Um, and so I have a ton of them. So I have not run out yet. So I feel like those are 2 that I've done.
Mhm.
So yeah, some
Yeah.
great
And
ideas.
when I say writing, I mean write and discuss. So it
Mm,
turns into a whole class conversation, but I have them writing while I'm typing it up on the
Hmm.
screen.
okay.
Yep.
Um, yeah, because then and I make them write it by hand as well because that that physical act of writing means that they're remembering it more, and it's pushing them to it's a way for them to help internalize the structure of the
Mm-hmm.
grammar
Yeah,
and
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
the diacritical marks and stuff like that. So I do think it's important to have them writing as well.
I also
Oh,
find it's my classroom is always very calm when everyone is writing. And I don't know if it's probably just a coincidence because everyone's literally focused on pen to paper, but those are always some of the most focused moments in my room. And those are some of I mean, that's when you can really get your great pop-up grammar in. That's really my only time that I can do. I feel like I get my best types of pop-up grammar lessons and, chats
Yeah.
about like meta language and all that type of cool stuff that those kids want to know about. So,
yeah, absolutely. Those are some really, really great ideas. We're getting close to the end, so I want to ask, what routines or phrases help you reset expectations without killing the vibe, killing the morale, without going into that, the Snoopy want teacher.
when things get close to that point where I'm about to lose it, I will say no me molestes porque me están molestando. Don't bug me because you're starting to bug me.
Yeah.
And they all know what that means. And then if it gets past that point with the particular students that are the offenders, then I switch to English and I invite them to take a walk. And then they know I mean business. Because when I invite someone to leave my room, then it's like become an issue. And I think everyone who knows me just knows like if she tells you to leave, like you're past the point of it being funny anymore.
Yeah.
So usually it's just, do you need to take a walk and think about this? Do you need to take a walk and calm yourself? Do you need to take a walk and recollect your thoughts? And it's in English and it's quick and they'll say yes or no. And then I just continue to move on with what I need to do.
I think that's key also that you make it quick and dirty and then come right back and get back into class. It's not turns into a lecture type of thing. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's an important thing because I think the lecture will definitely take the vibe and you're not going to get it back.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Jackie?
Like I said before, I use the whole time and place thing. And I will also ask if I look amused. Um, like, and I got this from my mother, but I have a very good scary stare.
Do I
And
do not have that.
oh yeah, no, I have a very good scary stare. All of my friends were afraid of my mother. I was afraid of my mother. I and I had that look in high school. I remember I was backstage during a rehearsal and some people were clowning around backstage, which you were not supposed to do because you were supposed to be silent backstage because everything that goes on backstage you can hear on stage and in the audience. And I just stood there behind one of them and just did my did my best mom stare and the kid turned around and like startled and it cut it out. So I do have the benefit of a very nice RBF um, that I will pull out and I will just stare at them. And then I usually get a sorry, ma'am. And, so I typically don't even have to say anything. I can just stare at them. And then I also I try to keep time to in Spanish. And so like I just reset the timer and then I just stare at them, holding the button to start it again until they stop, and then eventually their classmates stop them. Like because I believe in peer pressure. Like
I'm with you. I do the silent. I stop. I say, the angrier I get, the quieter I become. So I'll just stop everything and be quiet and just wait and I'll wait and I'll wait. But you said that stare face. I don't have it. I was told my years ago with when I was working with Carmen Andrews, I was like, I don't have kids, so I don't have that face. I just don't have it. And she goes, well, make your face and let's see. And then we're at lunch, and all the teachers are like, yeah, that wouldn't work for me either. That face that you have, it's not going to work. And then I find it hard because sometimes what the kids say are so inappropriate, but at the same time, so funny that it's
Yeah, the
really
best.
hard not to laugh or keep a straight face. Just some of the things that come out of their mouths. And I'm like, I know I should not be laughing at this, but I can't help it. There, I mean, it was just hilarious. And then I'll have to say something like, so inappropriate, funny, but definitely inappropriate, not the time, not the place kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
for me, what works for me and is just going silent. Um, just going silent. And the kids know it's really bad when I'll cancel class. Like, we'll be like 10 minutes at the end of class, and I'll be like, okay, everybody, put your stuff away. You're just sitting there quietly. I don't want no talking, no nothing. You can't open a book. You can't read. You can't do anything. You just have to sit there. We're all going to sit there in quiet because I'm done teaching because you're done learning. And we just sit there. And then it's like 10 minutes of really uncomfortability. And then at the end of class, they go, okay, that was painful. We're going to start fresh tomorrow,
Hmm.
and give them that little thing. So the silence really works. And that peer pressure, like you said, does work when you get really, really silent. That's what works best for me. Um, and like Kayla said, um, to make it quick and come right back to what you were doing so that it's not so because lots of times what they're trying to do is to get attention, and they don't care whether it's a negative attention or positive attention. It's just attention is what they want. And so they'll do that. um, and then if you give them more attention by disciplining them there in that moment for an extended period of time, they got exactly what they want, and they're more likely to do something like that again in the future. Where if you shut it down really quick and then get right back to class, they're less likely to pull that, saying that, well, that didn't work. So in those moments.
And
When I
another thing
have
that
days
we
that
I
get,
try to do
go
is I
ahead.
try to preempt some of that. So like if I know I have kids who are like that, who just want and crave attention, sometimes I try to give them a little bit of one-on-one attention at the beginning of class, like when they're doing bell work and stuff like that. And I just kind of like focus on them and talk to them a little bit and like give them that one-on-one adult attention that I know that they kind of crave. And that kind of helps later on because it helps them, I guess, regulate or whatever it is. It helps, but it also humanizes me to them. And so then when I need to get on to them, they know it's not because Profe hates me. It's not because of this, that, and the other. And then, if it's a lot of them doing stuff, the other thing I will say is like, guys, I don't need to pass this class. I already
Mm-hmm.
took this class and I already got my degree in Spanish. I don't need Spanish 2. Y'all need it. Y'all need to pass this class so that you can graduate. So, and I just leave it at that. And that usually shapes a lot of them up. So,
Yeah, that's something that what you talked about is something that Susie Gross talked about, is filling their love bank so that you can take withdrawals. So you have to
mhm.
boost them up so that they know that you do like them, and it's not about that you don't like them. That you're boosting that up, and then when you need to take a withdrawal and discipline them, you've got something to take. If you've never filled their love bank up first, then you're going into the negative, and then that starts to make some tension between you and the student right off the bat. So I think that is a really good point.
Yeah, I was gonna say it kind of goes well after what you just said, both of you, of when I have days that get really uncomfortable like that, usually the next day, I like to have a little bit of closure to then begin that day. So I'll be like, hey, I know this happened yesterday. I love you guys so much though. And like, let's please remember why you're here. So I'll either, I'll bring in like, we're here because you want to learn Spanish. I know you guys want this, and look at what you've been able to achieve until this point, so let's keep that going. But what happened yesterday cannot happen. And then I usually have like a meme or a gif literally related to the incident that happened, like on my welcome slide. Like there'll be like a meme of like when you and your friend are looking at each other like this after the teacher crashes out on both of you and like you're both like and like it's like I still have my humor, I'm still me, I'm still Senorita. I still love you so much, but like at the same time, like let's remember why we're here. So I feel like that's my way that I get a little bit of closure, so then we can just move on from like a fresh slate. And I've gotten feedback from the kids that they appreciate that. And some of my kids who've been the offenders of certain things, have come into class and been like, I'm really sorry for what happened yesterday. It was for this reason, and it won't happen again, and blah blah blah. And it's good going forward. And it's because we built that community ahead of time. So
Absolutely. And I tell my kids always, I go, I might get angry in the moment, but I'm not one who holds grudges. When the bell rings, it's over for me, and we start fresh the next day. Always start with fresh. To let kids know that you don't have to hang on to the anger, and it doesn't have to linger, and it doesn't have to fester to become something bigger than that. That we just say, it happened. It's over. Let's start fresh and start anew, because we all make mistakes. I make mistakes. You make mistakes. We'll make mistakes tomorrow, but we can all grow from those mistakes and start every day with a fresh start, so that we can move on. And I think it's a really important kind of thing, and it's a good, like, whole citizen teaching moment for them, not just a Spanish teaching moment. That we're trying to be good citizens, and if we hold grudges and stuff like that, those kinds of things fester into something much bigger than into a point where we can't control it anymore. So we need to be able to let go. Life's too short to be able to hold on to these kinds of things, and I think it's a really good lesson to teach them. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, it's very needed. And because a lot of them are not getting it at home.
Yeah,
They're just
and a
not.
lot of them aren't getting anything at home, to be quite honest. In some of my
mhm.
cases, they don't get any kind of attention, feedback, positive or negative.
Role
Be
modeling.
teaching. Yeah,
Yeah.
their home lives are really depressing for some of them, and I feel for these kids, some of them, that the only
Yeah.
love and attention they get is at school,
Hmm.
and that's just a sad situation that we're in. We are at our time. Does anybody have any final things that they would like to say as we close out today?
One final thing I wanted to add is that I think part of the way that I maintain that uh, vibe of being friendly leader, not buddy, who teaches Spanish, is I like to share about my professional endeavors with my kids, and I find that they find it really interesting. And I was trying to think back to my high school teachers, and nobody ever shared any of that with us. And maybe it was because no one was really doing anything outside the classroom, which is fine. But I find when I present, when I attend conferences, when I do service work, even this podcast, I like to share that stuff with my kids, like, hey, I'm doing this. And I feel like that kind of creates that like subconscious, like, okay, like Senorita's cool, but she also knows her stuff. So like we're still gonna like listen to what she has to say and like trust her with our Spanish journey. So, and I don't know, I think, you go back to role modeling and, seeing teachers and seeing adults in their careers and in their professions, continuing to learn and networking and being part of these professional communities. And so I think there's maybe a stigma of like, don't share too much about your lives with your kids. But in this regard, I really like to share those things with them. And I found that it's been really beneficial.
It also teaches them that we're
Yeah.
lifelong learners, and that we always, every
Yeah.
school has it somewhere in their mission statement to make lifelong learners out of these kids. But if we don't demo that, just telling them that is not going to work. That you need to be learning. I tell them I'll be watching something on TV. Like years ago, probably about 10 years ago, I watched this program. It was not even a documentary, it was a TV show. And they were talking about plants that didn't need soil or water to live. And I'm like, what? That can't be a real thing. So I had to pause the TV show was on, and I went and looked it up on Google, and there is. It's a plant that lives like in crevices of mountains, and you can buy them in plant stores, and they don't need any soil. They just live in a crevice of a rock, and then they get all their moisture out of the air that they need, and that's all that they need. And I'm like, well, I mean, I'm always learning. There's something I'm watching or something that triggers something, and I have to look it up. right away, or our learning communities that we're part of, or if we go to conferences. I think that's really important as well, because it shows them that, yeah, we have our degrees and we might be at the end of our careers or in the middle of our careers, but we're still learning. We didn't just stop and be stagnant at that moment. Absolutely. It's a great way to end that one. What about you, Jackie?
So sometimes it can seem scary and it can seem like you don't have control of your classroom when they get chill and they get too comfortable and too relaxed. And because there is this mentality of like school is serious and you come in and you sit in a desk and you face the board and you take notes and then you take a quiz and then you take a test, at very like super harsh, strict. And so relaxing out of that can feel really scary because it feels like a lack of control. Um, and it's important to realize that like you can have the relaxed vibe and relaxed atmosphere and the community aspect and still be the adult in the room. And it can take time to develop that balance, but it is possible and it's not always going to feel super comfortable. Um, but that's okay. And I think a lot of teachers kind of they shy away from it when it feels uncomfortable.
And especially as
Absolutely.
language teachers, we're not regular subjects. Like we teach communication and we teach connection, and you have to feel comfortable to do that. So it just makes sense.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to reiterate for my closing that the non negotiable is a really key word there. What are you willing to put up with in your class? And it may not look, I mean, another teacher's like, oh my gosh, there's no way I would allow that to happen in class. Where other teachers, like, flexible seating, like sitting on the floor and that kind of stuff, I allow
Mhm.
that to happen too. My rule is as long as you're paying attention, you're with us. However you sit, doesn't matter to me because that's not the point. I want you to be comfortable. But if you're not paying attention, guess what? You're in that hard child seat, that student seat that's sitting there, and you're going to be sitting upright, feet on the floor, no crossing legs, no nothing, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So it's up to you how you do that. But that works out really, really well. Make that non-negotiable. What are you willing to let slide or let happen in your classroom, and where is that line? And make sure that your kids know where that line is, those non-negotiables. Things like being unsafe, whether it be emotionally, because I like that Jackie brought that in. We normally think of unsafe, we think physically, but emotionally unsafe as well. Being unproductive, excluding people, too much swearing in the wrong time and place, those kinds of things. Have that line, those non-negotiables. I think that's really, really good. And don't just think about them in your head. Things don't exist until you write them down. So even if you
Mhm.
don't share the list with your kids, write it down, have it on a sticky note close to your desk. I have tons of sticky notes that I tape to my desk that I'm like, okay, these, in fact, what I sometimes do is I take a piece of paper and I stick my sticky notes to this paper and tape it down, and I put that in one of those protective sleeves, and I tape the protective
Mhm.
sleeve to my desk. So I have quick references I can look at. I go, oh, I need to hit the Super 7. I have a list of my Super 7 verbs that are up there, so I make sure that I'm hitting them. I have my non-negotiable things that I'm not willing to do. Those kind of little notes that are there and on my table at all times, and they're not laminated because I need to maybe add or change. So I just have that sleeve that I slip the paper in and slip the paper out. Works really, really well for me. Little reminders for myself. Yes, no, either or. Question word questions, just I forgot to ask a question word question. It helps me keep myself on track. So with that, that's a wrap today, everybody. A huge thanks to you for hanging out with us today, and an extra big thank to Kayla and Jackie for keeping it real and reminding us that strong community still needs structure. And if today's episode helped you rethink boundaries, leadership energy, or how to reset without nuking your classroom vibe, mission accomplished. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, leave a quick review, and share this episode with that one teacher friend who definitely needs it, but will never admit it. You can watch us live on YouTube or catch the replay on your favorite podcast app. Ditch the drills, trust the process, and I'll see you next time on Comprehend This. Bye-bye, everybody.